Okay, I want to look at another recent article. This headline says Tony Podesta sues former clients seeking to collect on unpaid bills. And this is another sign, the latest sign that Tony Podesta, it seems, is running out of money. And he was a major lobbyist, one of the Democrats' biggest lobbyists. Obviously, his brother John Podesta, big name in the Democrat Party as well. He was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. He also worked with the Obama administration and Bill Clinton before then. Here is John Podesta with Hillary Clinton as well, in another article, mainstream article actually, that talks about the downfall of the Podesta brothers, both John and Tony Podesta, and another recent sign that Tony Podesta was losing his fortune. Part of this ties in with his art collection. People that have seen coverage on the Podesta brothers may have seen some of Tony Podesta's artwork after the Podesta leaks. People were sharing some of the creepy artwork that Tony Podesta has. Look that up if you haven't seen it, although some of it, I do warn you, is pretty creepy. But he has had to sell some of that collection off. They recently talked about this. This was an article from 2018 saying years of spending on art, vacations, and real estate left Mr. Podesta over-leveraged and deeply in debt when he finally closed the doors of his 62-person firm at the end of last year. So that was the end of 2017. This is an article from a couple of months back, but this was, again, a sign that Tony Podesta looks like he's running out of money. They said a couple months ago that he is selling his New York City condo along with some of his prized sculptures from his art collection. So that could also eat into another revenue stream, and kind of a sketchy revenue stream that even, again, some semi-mainstream sources were pointing out. Finally, kind of talking about some of the issues with the Podesta brothers. It seems really in the last year, since the Podesta group has been shut down, even people in the mainstream have been trying to distance themselves from the Podestas, pointing out issues that they wouldn't have before. One specific thing having to do with his art collection. Here's one article talking about something unethical, that's their description, that Podesta was probably doing with the Podesta Group and his own art collection. They pull this quote saying that the Internal Revenue Service determined that in 2007 and 2008, the Podesta Group paid more than $300,000 for the shipping and handling of art bought by Mr. Podesta. This was money that was improperly reported as a business expense, according to documents viewed by the Journal. Later, Mr. Podesta began billing his firm $360,000 a year to rent pieces displayed at the office. The firm also paid part of the salary of Mr. Podesta's art curator. So they are talking about how Podesta has recently fell from grace. This is all coming after the Podesta leaks, along with the charges or the investigation. They are not saying criminal charges officially, or that has not been publicly disclosed at this time, but Podesta is under investigation by federal prosecutors for failure to disclose other foreign lobbying work. That was a big part of the shutdown of the Podesta Group as well. So they mentioned that. They say that Podesta's sprawling art holdings play a major role in this saga as well, threading through everything from the scale of his success to the grounds for his latest divorce to some highly questionable business decisions. That's how they describe it, highly questionable business decisions at his DC firm. And then they highlight this section again, saying that 2007 to 2008, Podesta Group paid more than $300,000 for the shipping and handling of art bought by Mr. Podesta. This was improperly reported as a business expense. According to documents, Podesta later began billing his firm $360,000. His own firm, he billed them $360,000 a year to rent pieces displayed at his office. The firm also paid part of the salary of Mr. Podesta's art curator. So looking at this, they say if your business has nothing to do with art, which the Podesta Group, it's a political lobbying group. So that would be the category. It's not art. This is not a museum or anything, the Podesta Group. So he says if your business has nothing to do with art, which the Podesta Group would fall under that category, then reporting shipping And art handling charges as a business expense looks bad, or it looks like you're intentionally misleading somebody. That's what the Podestas were trying to do here, looks like. Directing the firm to subsidize the cost as a personal curator, I would argue, is worse. That's what they said at the end as well of just that one section. Even if part of the curator's ongoing job is to switch around the works installed at your office, not that your clients care about what's on the walls, by the way, the charging of an average of $30,000 a month to a company that you own, the Podesta owns, in this case, for the privilege of showing his own collection. So he's charging his own company for the privilege of showing his own collection. He's charging his own company $30,000 a month. In his opinion, the worst of all of these. I feel confident saying as much because without getting myself into trouble, I'm very familiar with this tactic. This is a regular fraudulent tactic that is used in the art community. Obviously, Podesta benefited from converting a small subset of his artworks into a 5-figure cash infusion every month. But let's focus on 2 more subtle ways a deal like this could personally enrich a collector who also happens to be in a position of power at the company leasing the art. It's Podesta's own company. First, there's the storage issue. Granted, Podesta had a real estate portfolio that once included properties in DC, New York, Virginia, Venice, Sydney, and Tasmania, while he gave up some fraction of his 1,300 piece collection in his 2014 divorce settlement. The report had said that he'd retained most of it, and then the other, it was around the same time, this other report from last year saying that he had been forced to sell more sculptures since then, but he still did have a fair size of this. Some of this is coming before. This report is based off things that he had done before the closure of the Podesta group. So he did still have most of his collection at that time, and they're saying now maybe every one of these properties was the size of Versailles, and or the rooms inside each were so crowded with works that they would have forced the claustrophobic to start gasping into a paper bag. Technically, I can't rule out these possibilities, but if these scenarios were not the case, then the majority of the pieces Podesta owned were in a climate-controlled warehouse most of the time, in which would have meant that they were bleeding him of cash from inside the cozy darkness of their crates every 30 days. So by paying a sizable monthly fee to show works that would have otherwise been in paid art storage, then Podesta's firm would have been enriching him twice over, both saving that money, and he's actually getting paid for it as well. So it was there's a little bit more to that article, but I want to get more into this lawsuit of these current clients. But it's just relevant given that, again, they're saying that he was forced to sell off his condo, some of his art collection, and this was another sketchy kind of revenue stream that he had at the time as well. So that might be eating into that side revenue that Podesta was making as well. And now in the latest sign that Podesta is running out of money, he's turning on his own clients, probably ruining any potential future business relationship that he might have had with any of these clients here in order to just try to get any immediate cash that he can out of them. He's trying to collect on unpaid bills. A lot of this was for work that had been done after the Podesta group had been shut down. So that's why most of these clients are arguing that they should be paid. They'd still done this work, but the Podesta group had already shut down in most of these cases. This is what they're saying. Democrat lobbyist Tony Podesta has been suing former clients over what he says are nearly $500,000 in unpaid bills, some of it for work he claims was done after his firm collapsed and stopped paying employees. The Podesta group, an empty shell for more than a year after it imploded amid revelations about his work and failure to disclose this foreign lobbying that he had done. He's since sued. Podesta is suing 10 former clients in recent months, according to court records. They include name brand companies such as SeaWorld, as well as nonprofits such as the Refugee Council USA and Thurgood Marshall College Fund. The suits show the lengths to which Podesta, one of the most prominent Democrat lobbyists in Washington, before the collapse of his firm. It shows the lengths that he is now willing to go to scrape money, any possible money, out of what remains of his firm. Podesta, who accumulated a multi-million-dollar art collection during his flush years, has continued to live a high-flying lifestyle in the aftermath of his firm's implosion, including recent trips to Venice, Florence, Rome, and the French coast, according to his Facebook posts. The suits claim that the clients failed to pay their final bills or other fees owed to the firm. In some cases, the Podesta Group They're saying in some cases the Podesta Group is trying to get paid for work that it claims was done late last year after the firm told its lobbyists and most other employees they would stop getting paid. At least one former client is fighting back. Podesta Group had sued Ajami, it's a Houston law firm. Last month, Podesta sued them for failing to pay its final monthly bill last year of $15,000. The firm responded by suing the Podesta Group. They sued the Podesta Group back for up to $200,000 in damages, accusing the firm of failure to perform meaningful work after it came under scrutiny following President Donald Trump's election. The Podesta Group clearly became too busy covering its tracks and propping up its business to work on its clients' matters, including its work on behalf of the law firm. That's what the firm has argued in the suit. Podesta Group's lawyer and spokeswoman for Tony Podesta has declined to comment. The Podesta Group's suits have also sought payment from at least 3 clients: the Public Affairs Alliance of Iranian Americans, the Refugee Council USA, and HSN, the company behind the home shopping network, for work done after the firm stopped paying its employees late last year and told them to pack up their offices. So the Refugee Council, a coalition of groups that works to resettle refugees in the U.S., this Refugee Council retained the Podesta Group to lobby Congress on immigration and refugee issues. According to a disclosure filing, the council fired the Podesta Group on November 14th of 2017. According to the Podesta Group's suit, that was days after reports that the firm was disintegrating. So it's obviously as a result of that bad publicity on the Podesta Group. The Podesta Group, they were basically saying that they were shutting down. They lost that contract, but the Refugee Council's contract required 30 days notice to cancel. And the Podesta Group's lawyer appears to be arguing that the provision remained in force even if no one was working for the firm. The firm is seeking $45,000 in unpaid fees, much of which was incurred after the firm stopped paying its employees. 6 former Podesta Group staffers who spoke on condition of anonymity said that the firm did little work on behalf of its clients after Kimberly Fritz, the firm's chief executive, announced on November 10th that the employees would receive their final paychecks a few days later. So even Podesta Group employees are saying the Podesta Group wasn't even really doing any work, and yet Tony Podesta still wants to be paid for the contracts that he had at that time. 2 former Podesta staffers familiar with the work done for the Refugee Council and the Public Affairs Alliance of the Iranian Americans have said that they weren't aware of any work done on behalf of those clients after mid-November. Podesta staffers don't know of any work that was done for those clients, and Podesta still wants to be paid for it. It's hard to imagine anyone else trying to collect money under these circumstances. One former Podesta Group staffer said, "What alleged work is he looking to get paid for?" So these are former staffers of the Podesta Group that are just openly saying, what is Tony Podesta even doing? I mean, how desperate is he? What does he think that he's doing to even attempt to try to get paid for this non-work? Podesta Group was one of the Washington's top lobbying firms by revenue as recently as last year, but the firm imploded late last year after special counsel Robert Mueller charged Manafort with failing to register as foreign lobbyist. for work that he did with the firm years earlier. Neither Tony Podesta nor the Podesta Group have been publicly charged, or is not publicly known, although they are part of an investigation currently. It's been handed off to other prosecutors, so we're waiting to see exactly what happens criminally with that. But nonetheless, this, I guess, is not a good sign for the Podestas, for Tony Podesta, or it's probably a good sign, I guess, if you're happy to see Tony Podesta run out of money. I mean, that's a start. I imagine a lot of people commenting are going to say it's a start, but they would like to see more come of this. He is under this investigation by other federal prosecutors. They're not saying criminal charges at this time. Obviously, there's so many allegations against the Podesta brothers, and there's other things that I have spent time talking about here before, but just focusing on the Manafort charges, and they're talking about Flynn again today. So these are the things that are they're currently talking about with this Mueller investigation, just focusing on that specifically. Tony Podesta, there still could be more going on with that investigation. Again, they're just not being totally clear about the exact extent of what they're looking at Podesta for that. There definitely is enough wrongdoing to have criminal charges against Podesta for that lobbying work, for the failure to disclose that lobbying work, especially for what has happened with Manafort. Podesta has done at least that and much more. And again, that's without even touching on all these other allegations that there are as well. It is interesting, though, to see that there are all these signs that he is running out of money, and the mainstream media is just openly calling out the Podesta groups, throwing them under the bus, basically saying that they're finished. Former staffers in that recent article as well, talking about the lawsuit. You have former staffers from the Podesta group, people that were working for Podesta as recently as a few months ago, now talking against him as well, basically saying, what is he doing here? This article is pretty interesting. Now, there's a lot here as well, but there were a couple of maybe I can just skim through here as well. Those were the main things that I wanted to touch on with what is going on currently with Podesta. But this is a fairly recent article, and it ties in with what I was talking about as well. There is a lot here, but maybe we can just, for the end, if you'd like to stay around, if you're watching live, there's a few things here that may be interesting I could go through. Wall Street Journal article from April talking about the fall of Tony Podesta, how Tony Podesta, Washington power broker, lost it all. Tony Podesta was in line to be the king of K Street. His lobbying firm ended in 2015 as the third largest in Washington, D.C., with nearly $30 million in revenue from more than 100 clients, spanning from the Alphabet Incorporated, Google, to Wells Fargo, with his longtime friend Hillary Clinton expected to win the White House. 2016 promised to be even better. Mr. Podesta, a conspicuous presence in his red shoes and Italian suits, hosted lawmakers and power brokers at his flat in Venice during the Art Biennale. It's one of his many homes around the globe, including the Washington Mansion, where he displayed a collection of museum-grade artwork. In early 2016, he was ready to buy a $7.4 million condo overlooking Madison Square Park in New York City. Then he fell. This huge collapse propelled by unexpected blows, the loss of the election by Hillary Clinton, his getting caught up in this investigation over these lobbying ties, the Podesta leaks, all these other things happening, delivered by fate and made worse by hubris, they said. Financial problems, legal threats, and the election of President Donald Trump took all of this away from Podesta, the clients, the firm, and finally, Mr. Podesta's position as one of Washington's most influential players. His troubles, some long hidden, surfaced in the summer of 2016. The Podesta Group lost its banker over news that the firm did work for the U.S. subsidiary of a Russian bank under sanctions. Then came headlines that the firm's work with Trump's former campaign chairman and associate may have violated government rules. And in October, WikiLeaks published the Podesta leaks of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's former campaign chairman. So amid this string of embarrassing news, accounts disturbed many. These accounts disturbed many of the Podesta Group's corporate clients, companies that preferred to stay clear of such publicity. So people not wanting to be associated with Podesta after all of this has come out. Mr. Podesta operated as if the whole mess would soon blow over. He spent most of the fall traveling the world. He returned to the U.S. on election day, but skipped Mrs. Clinton's campaign party. Her victory would go a long way to fixing many of his problems. She lost that night, and Mr. Podesta, like many who had banked on her victory, did too. Clients who had hired him for access to a new Clinton administration fell away. By the end of the year, the departures cost the firm more than $10 million in annual business, according to an internal Podesta Group accounting report that had been viewed by the Journal. So they immediately lost $10 million in annual business right after the election. Then again, they say more recently, Tony Podesta has said that he has had to sell off his New York City condo, some of his prized sculptures. Mr. Podesta responded to questions through a spokeswoman for the Podesta Group. Mr. Podesta's clients, colleagues, friends, and even many of his political adversaries through the years continue to rely on his wise counsel, the spokeswoman has said. When he stepped down from the firm, he expressed his ongoing gratitude to all of them and his commitment to continue his advocacy for the issues and ideals he's always fought for. This account of Mr. Podesta's rise and fall is based on interviews with dozens of former employees, from his firm and associates. They go through in more detail. This is one of the pretty creepy pieces of art. They're calling it art, I guess, if you could call it that. One of these sculptures that he had that closely, I guess this resembles a photo of a Dahmer victim or something. This golden statue. It's just one example. So he also had, they talk about his marriage and divorce. They say Tony Podesta built up his lobbying firm over the years, renamed the Podesta Group in 2007. Talk about some of his clients. At age 59, he married Heather Miller, a congressional staffer, 26 years younger. The April 2003 marriage was her third. Mrs. Podesta started her own lobbying firm, Heather Podesta and Partners, and they emerged a Washington power couple. In 2006, they bought a $4 million home in upscale Kalorama neighborhood and spent millions more renovating it to showcase their art collection. I think this house is very close to Jeff Bezos's house as well, the owner of Amazon. This Kalorama house. It's 2 doors from where the Obamas now live as well, they said. They say in this article, this was the crown jewel of Mr. Podesta's real estate portfolio that over the years included apartments in New York City, these other houses as well. He owned a townhouse on Capitol Hill for entertaining and fundraising. Mr. Podesta drew an annual salary of more than $2 million and made millions more in commissions and bonuses. He and Heather Podesta together donated more money to the Democrat Party and its candidates than any other Washington lobbyist in the past decade, fundraising records show. Podesta Group grew from the 20th largest lobbying group to the 3rd in 3 years in terms of domestic and foreign lobbying revenues, propelled by business during President Barack Obama's first term. And just to step in, one thing that I have brought up that the mainstream articles that are finally bringing up some of these issues with Podesta, the majority of them are not bringing up, at least with these lobbying scandals, these controversies, the federal investigation as well over the failure to disclose that lobbying work. They are talking about Tony Podesta. They're not focusing on John Podesta. And they're saying here, they're noting this huge growth of the Podesta Group during President Obama's first term. And it was around the end of Obama's first term that John Podesta was officially brought in as part of Obama's inner circle. Podesta was working for Obama even before then, earlier in the administration. But you have to wonder, and I mean, it's clear that John Podesta's access to Barack Obama is a reason that the Podesta Group has gotten a lot of these contracts. Publicly, John Podesta said that he hasn't worked for the Podesta Group, that his brother's been running it, Tony Podesta's been running it. John has said that he has not worked for the Podesta Group since 1993. There's tons of emails showing that he has done work for the Podesta Group, with the Podesta Group having shut down and being investigated. John Podesta should probably be under investigation as well. Again, so many allegations against the Podestas, but just for the work on the Podesta Group that they're talking about with Tony Podesta. Tony Podesta is going broke over this. He is under some federal investigation publicly. They're bringing up his name is kind of getting dragged through the mud, but John Podesta is kind of avoiding this in the mainstream accounts of this, at least. But he definitely was involved with the Podesta Group, obviously. And that huge growth, that's a red flag. That is alarming, definitely. So they say that it was propelled by business during President Barack Obama's first term. They had this huge growth, the Podesta Group. The leap was impressive given competition from global giants that employed hundreds. During the Obama administration, the Podesta Group took in more than $40 million a year at its peak. The firm leased $200,000 a month for offices on 2 floors, joined by a custom spiral staircase. Mr. Podesta operated as a lifestyle concierge for clients and had a regular table nearby a popular Italian restaurant. He was also part owner of Centralina, which is an Italian restaurant in a new billion-dollar development. The Podesta's 1,300-piece art collection included photographs, several well-known artists. They talk about these 8 sculptures valued at $25 million. The Podestas donated Shepard Fairey's original Hope portrait of Mr. Obama to the National Portrait Gallery. Internal, and this was the quote that they expanded on. I talked about earlier in this video, where Podesta was also running this scheme with his own company, renting out art, overinflating the value of it, renting it out to his own company, and misestimating the value to the IRS as well. The Internal Revenue Service determined 2007 and 2008, Podesta Group had paid more than $300,000 for the shipping and handling of art brought by Mr. Podesta. This was improperly reported. Again, we looked at that quote before. Employees of the Podesta Group set up a system to prevent Mr. Podesta from being reimbursed by the company for personal expenditures. 36-page instruction manual for Mr. Podesta's executive assistants included this directive: it's up to you and your best judgment as to what gets reimbursed. Mr. Podesta's passion for art drove a wedge in the marriage after Mrs. Podesta learned he was secretly making purchases. According to people familiar with the matter, in 2014, the couple filed for divorce, with the art collection caught in a legal tug-of-war. In the settlement, Mr. Podesta kept most of the collection. He gave up homes in Washington and Manhattan and nearly $5 million in retirement savings. He's agreed to pay his former wife, $200,000 every 3 months for 5 years. The day the divorce was final, in July 2014, Mr. Podesta took a loan. Mr. Podesta took out a loan from Citigroup using some of his art as collateral, public records show. That month, Mr. Podesta told senior employees the firm could make more money by agreeing to represent clients unpopular with Democrats. The discussion prompted one lobbyist to quit, costing the firm more than $2 million in yearly revenue from his former clients, according to public records and former employees. Former employees approached Mr. Podesta in early 2014 about selling them a share of the business. The Podesta Group was worth at least $50 million at the time. former employees had estimated. Over dinner, Mr. Podesta told them that he was open to the idea and suggested they meet with lawyers. On the day of the meeting, employees gathered in the firm's conference room, but Mr. Podesta didn't show up after to the meeting that he had scheduled with his own employees. Mr. Podesta sought a group of higher paying clients, including foreign governments, instead. According to public disclosure reports, by 2015, the year after his divorce, Mr. Podesta had doubled his overseas business from 4 years earlier to $5 million. Firm clients including the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Republic of Iraq, and the government of South Sudan, according to foreign agent reports that were filed with the Justice Department. So then they talk about the investigations going on currently as Special Counsel Robert Mueller dug into the Ukraine work. The string of headlines and ongoing federal probe chased off Podesta Group clients. Compounding the firm's troubles, it lost the governments of Iraq, Vietnam, and Kosovo in May and June, which since 2012 had been paying $6 million. At the end of May, Mr. Podesta moved into his new condo in New York City. Employees again approached Mr. Podesta about buying the firm. Over a 3-hour dinner on August 7th, Mr. Podesta apologized for the pain he had caused them and said again that he would consider selling. By week's end, he was at French beach town for vacation. Before dawn on Monday, October 23rd of 2017, NBC News reported that Mr. Mueller was preparing to indict Mr. Manafort and implicate Mr. Podesta regarding the Ukraine work. The phones then started ringing. Clients wanted to know what was going on. The firm's bank wanted to discuss its account. The following night, Mr. Podesta threw himself a birthday party, serving hundreds of guests pizza from a brick oven stove in his backyard in Kalorama. On Friday that week, news outlets reported that Mr. Mueller's first indictments would be unveiled Monday. Mr. Podesta, with employees over the weekend, he talked with them. Some had said that they planned to quit and take their clients. On Saturday afternoon, he attended a surprise 70th birthday party for Hillary Clinton. On Monday, the 30th of October, prosecutors announced the indictment of Manafort, Gates. The indictment alleged that Podesta, the Podesta Group, identified as Company B, had worked with them for Ukraine. Mr. Podesta, in a staff meeting, said he would step back from the firm after this came out. Following day, an official with the firm's new bank, Chain Bridge Bank, demanded $655,000 in cash or collateral within 24 hours, or it would just cut off the firm's credit line. At that time, people probably remember this tweet. Some people might remember this tweet from President Trump. I remember seeing this in October 2017. President Trump tweeted about this, saying, the biggest story yesterday, the one that has the Democrats in a dither, is Podesta running from his firm. With clients leaving, the Podesta Group had no money. Rent was due the next day. One idea was to use Mr. Podesta's art collection as collateral for a loan, but he refused. At the time, it was inadvisable to provide additional guarantees as an individual for the obligations of the corporation. The Podesta Group spokeswoman had said that night Mr. Podesta ducked out to a birthday party for former governor, who gave him a hug. He said he did good quality work. They said the Podesta Group's chief financial officer sent Mr. Podesta an email saying, if we don't have collateral pledged prior to 5 p.m. tomorrow, we will be in default. If the firm went into default, the CFO wrote, we will not be able to meet our rent, your art payments, ad campaigns, and most importantly, payroll. Mr. Podesta responded, need list of next 5 layoffs, among other questions. The next day, he left for an art show in Italy. The bank's deadline passed. By the end of the work week, Wells Fargo, Walmart, and Oracle had quit the Podesta Group. Some employees packed up. personal items from their desks. On Friday, the firm's CFO quit. That night, a senior manager sent an email to Podesta, still in Italy, saying that the bank had frozen the firm's funds. This means that we have no way to pay employees. The email said, if we do not alert employees immediately that we have no way to pay them for their work, the firm is committing fraud. In response, Mr. Podesta said that he would call the bank. At this point, there's no money to meet payroll on the 15th. So you should plan to have a staff meeting on Monday to alert the staff. Mr. Podesta responded from Italy saying that he was not going into personal bankruptcy to keep the firm afloat. So he was saying he would not go into personal bankruptcy to help his employees. On Wednesday, the following week, movers began taking down Mr. Podesta's art from the office walls. On Thursday evening, Kimberly Fritz told the staff the Podesta Group was closing and that employees would get their last paycheck in 6 days. Healthcare coverage would cease by year's end. As Ms. Fritz broke the news, Mr. Podesta was in New York for the rollout of a fashion calendar published by another personal client. The 2-day bash was capped by a black tie dinner with Naomi Campbell, Sean Diddy Combs, and other celebrities. Before closing the firm's doors, Mr. Podesta gave himself an advance on his lobbying commissions. And I guess it sounds like he needed it, or that's what it's sounding like, along with this other news, still trying to get any money out of the firm that he possibly can, even for work that they didn't do. It sounds like that's what it sounds like in this most recent article. That is just from the 20th of last month. So that one is from about 2 weeks ago, saying that Tony Podesta is suing his former clients. And this was an interesting recap a few months before then from the Wall Street Journal, talking about having to sell off parts of his collection. Some of the timeline with the whole downfall of the Podesta Group, this investigation that is still going on with Mueller, which again, we're still waiting on more info from, and just some of the things that they happen to point to. I mean, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. It's kind of interesting that they're bringing up Hillary Clinton's birthday party that he happens to be attending around this time as all of this info is coming out. Have to wonder, did Tony Podesta and Hillary Clinton have any kind of conversations about this at her party? What else are they saying here? They also mentioned before dawn, Monday, October 23rd, when NBC News reported that Mr. Mueller was preparing to indict Manafort and implicate Mr. Podesta regarding his Ukraine work. Phones started ringing. Clients wanted to know what was going on. The firm's bank wanted to discuss its account as well. And then they're saying the following night, Mr. Podesta threw himself a birthday party, serving hundreds of guests pizza from a brick oven stove in his backyard. This was at his Kalorama house as well. So a lot of big names nearby as well. He's close to the Obamas, practically neighbors with the Obamas there, and Jeff Bezos, and he's throwing a pizza party as this is coming out with NBC News. Follows that up by going to Hillary Clinton's party just after that as well, or the week after. So pretty interesting. I will continue to follow this, obviously. Let me know what you think. I do have a link to the original article in the video description. I also have a link to my Patreon account, patreon.com/realityreader. Thanks everybody that has supported the channel over there. A couple dollars makes a huge difference, helps me keep talking about these issues here. Patreon.com/realityreader. There's also a link to my PayPal in the same video description, paypal.me/realityreader. And yes, the original articles you can look at. Tell me what you think, and I will follow up soon. Thank you.